Hello and welcome to India Today Global. I am Pranay Upadhyaya. The world is watching India's Operation Sindoor strikes, also India's major offensive against Pakistan militarily and diplomatically. Today, India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh was visiting Bhuj Air Base, which is one of the frontline air bases of India and which was intended to be targeted by Pakistan. However, Pakistan miserably failed in targeting any of the Indian air base. But Defence Minister Rajnath Singh gave a very stern message to Pakistan from the land of Bhuj. Today, we are joined by Sandeep Unnithan, senior defence journalist and an authority on such subjects. Welcome to India Today Global, Sandeep.
Thanks for having me, Pranay.
How do you see the statement coming from Rajnath Singh? Because this is successively the second day. He was in Srinagar yesterday, and today he visited Bhuj. He has been visiting all the bases. You have heard Prime Minister Narendra Modi from Adampur base. What does it show? What does it tell us about our diplomatic and military offensive?
Well, Pranay, the air battle is over. India has emerged winner in Operation Sindoor, the three-phase counter-terror and then counter-military operation that India launched, where the Air Force launched the most stunning number of air attacks that is launched in the shortest span of time. In just 23 minutes, we are told, hitting 11 targets across Pakistan, the length and breadth of Pakistan. This is in response, of course, to what Pakistan did by targeting our civilian areas and some of our air bases. The air battle is over. India has won decisively. Now the battle of narratives has begun, Pranay, and that is what you've actually seen with the Prime Minister's statement, putting down his red lines on this new war on terror, what India's red lines are.
The new normal.
The new normal as he outlined on the 12th of May. And that actually set the stage for the narrative building that India is now doing. We're going all guns blazing, Pranay, not just domestically, but to the international audience as well. We've activated all our ambassadors, our foreign minister, the foreign ministry, everybody's out there telling the world what India has done. It's unprecedented in terms of what, the kind of nuclear blackmail that India has stood up to. We've withstood this for 27 years, Pranay, nuclear-enabled terrorism that Pakistan has unleashed on us, the, nuclear weapons-enabled terrorism, I should call it that. And that's what the Prime Minister really called out in his speech on the 12th of May, that no more is India going to be blackmailed, Pranay. And I would see this as one of the most significant national security doctrines post-Pokhran. When we had no first use, after we tested nuclear weapons in 1998, Prime Minister Modi has come out nearly 27 years later to say that any attack of terrorism...
You're absolutely right, Sandeep. I think you would recall that post Parakram, we have initiated, or maybe like post Kargil, we initiated the Cold Start Doctrine. This is the new doctrine against terrorism, post 26/11, post Pulwama, post Pahalgam. So country has spoken loud and clear, the leadership has spoken loud and clear, enough is enough.
Yes. Absolutely, Pranay. And in fact, it's interesting you brought Cold Start up because I was asking friends about whether they think Cold Start, friends in the military who've actually been part of the whole process. And they seem to believe that, Cold Start is now on the back burner for now. But you never know because it is another option which has not been exercised in many years. Parakram kind of showed you the limitations of Cold Start or any kind of massive military mobilization where it would take you several months to mobilize your forces and deliver that punch across the border. But now I think what we have seen, Pranay, with Operation Sindoor is a political leadership which understands the use of coercive air power. And coercive air power, these are very, very important revelations, Pranay, because as we've seen in the past, Indian prime ministers have been very hesitant to use the Air Force when it comes to fighting adversaries. If you've seen in 1962, the Prime Minister of the day, Pandit Nehru, did not send the Air Force while the army was being mauled on the ground. If we had sent in the Air Force, we had a very capable, competent Air Force, better than the Chinese Air Force at that time, where, the Chinese Air Force, their aircraft were grounded because the Soviet Union had cut off assistance to them. We didn't use air power in 62. In 1999, Prime Minister
And we still recall that decision with lot of pain.
Absolutely, Pranay. I mean, this is the one of the greatest what ifs. If we had used our air power in 1962, we possibly could have rescued the day. We could have saved face and avoided the humiliation that that border war was for our military, where the Indian Army performed gallantry. I mean, outstanding gallantry was shown in certain theaters. They fought down to the last man, but because they didn't have the kind of support, the backing, and of course, most importantly, the use of offensive air power. And now if you look at 1999 as well, Pranay, you have Prime Minister Vajpayee authorizing the Air Force to enter and conduct air-to-ground missions. But that comes with a caveat that you cannot cross the international border, you can't cross the line of control. I mean, this is...
Absolutely.
You're fighting with one hand tied behind your back. And that was something that the Air Force also has recorded with a lot of anguish, because you cannot restrain air forces that way. They are meant to operate across wide spaces and tackle the enemy in ways that will influence the course of the land battle, because finally it's all about territory, what territory you grab and what you don't, in a kind of conflict that Kargil was.
Yes.
But now when you look at Operation Sindoor, Pranay, this is a very, very unusual military operation by any standards. The fact is that you've used the Air Force from the word go. From the first day, you've used the Indian Air Force to inflict those massive ground-to-air strikes on the terrorist camps, 9 of them. And then you went for a second wave of strikes using drones. And the third wave completely smashed Pakistani airfields, their installations, their radar sites and all of that. And a possible fourth phase was waiting off Karachi to the south of
You're
Karachi.
absolutely right, Sandeep, and I think that is the reason why Rajnath Singh, while addressing our air warriors, he categorically said that you guys have not only dominated the air, but you also decimated the Pakistani will. Before I request you to reflect upon these statements from Rajnath Singh, let us listen to what Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh spoken at the Bhuj Air Base.
साथियों, आपने पाकिस्तान में मौजूद टेरर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के खिलाफ प्रभावी कार्रवाई की है, मगर पाकिस्तान फिर से इस कोशिश में लग गया है कि ध्वस्त हुए आतंकी ढांचे को फिर से खड़ा किया जाए। वहां की सरकार पाकिस्तानी आम नागरिकों से लिया गया टैक्स जैशे मोहम्मद जैसे आतंकवादी संगठन के आका मसूद अजहर को करीब 14 करोड़ रुपए देने में खर्च करेगी, जबकि वह यूनाइटेड नेशंस डिजिग्नेटेड टेररिस्ट घोषित हो चुका है। इतना ही नहीं, लश्कर तोयबा और जैश ए मोहम्मद के मुरूद के और बहावलपुर स्थित टेरर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को फिर से खड़ा करने के लिए पाकिस्तान सरकार ने आर्थिक सहायता देने की घोषणा की है, लेकिन निश्चित रूप से इंटरनेशनल मॉनेटरी फंड से आने वाले $1 बिलियन के बड़े हिस्से को टेरर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को फंड करने में इस्तेमाल होगा, ऐसा मेरा मानना है। क्या यह इंटरनेशनल मॉनेटरी फंड IMF द्वारा, जो कि एक इंटरनेशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, उसके द्वारा इनडायरेक्ट फंडिंग इसे नहीं माना जाएगा? मैं दुनिया के लोगों के सामने यह सवाल रखना चाहता हूं। भारत यही चाहेगा कि IMF पाकिस्तान को अपनी $1 बिलियन की असिस्टेंस पर वह पुनर्विचार करे और आगे भी किसी भी तरह की सहायता देने से IMF परहेज करे। भारत नहीं चाहता जो फंडिंग हम IMF को करते हैं वह डायरेक्ट या इनडायरेक्ट किसी भी तरीके से पाकिस्तान या किसी भी देश में टेरर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को बनाने में वह इस्तेमाल की जाए। हम नहीं चाहते। साथियों, अब यह स्पष्ट हो गया है कि पाकिस्तान में आतंकवाद और वहां की सरकार का चोली दामन का संबंध है। स्टेट और नॉन स्टेट एक्टर के बीच का नकाब अब पूरी तरह से उतर चुका है। अतः इस परिस्थिति में यदि वहां परमाणु अस्त्र एटॉमिक वेपन रहते हैं तो इस बात की संभावनाओं को भविष्य में नकारा नहीं जा सकता कि कभी वो आतंकवादी तत्वों के हाथों में चले जाए। ये सिर्फ भारत के लिए नहीं बल्कि पूरी दुनिया के लिए और पाकिस्तान की आम जनता के लिए भी एक गंभीर खतरे की बात होगी।
Sandeep, you heard Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh talking about the global terror list. He categorically called out Pakistan for harboring terrorists. He named the Markaz-e-Subhanallah, Markaz-e-Tayyiba, and the way Pakistan has been nurturing terrorists, and not only nurturing them, but using them as a tool of foreign policy. What is India's game plan to take it forward? You said the new normal clearly defines that we will not get blackmailed by the nuclear boogie. We have called that out. We are exposing Pakistan, but what this offensive leads you to?
Well, Pranay, what Pakistan has been doing after getting hammered in Operation Sindoor is they have gone to the world when we struck at their nuclear airfields, the Sargodha and Chaklala. These are the old names for these two air bases. Pakistan went running to the world and said, nuclear, nuclear, nuclear. They do this all the time. Every time they're hammered, they go and ask for an intervention by either the world or by the United States or China. But that's how Pakistan is essentially. They're a tactical force. The Pakistan military, which actually guides the destiny of Pakistan, they throw the first punch, and their whole approach is that now let's see, whatever happens will happen, and the Chinese and the Americans will come to our rescue. Now, in this case, what the Pakistanis have tried to do is to project this whole issue as being one of Kashmir, right? They're trying to take the focus away from their nuclear weapons-enabled terrorism to the issue of Kashmir, and then trying to internationalize the Kashmir issue. So what the government of India is saying, very sensibly, is to bring the spotlight back on terrorism and the fact that Pakistan has been home to some of the biggest terrorist organizations in the world. Two of the most key Al-Qaeda operatives were captured, not just from any ordinary town of Pakistan, Pranay, but from Rawalpindi. That is the headquarters of General Headquarters of
Pakistan Army.
Pakistan Army. That is, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the actual planner of 2611, was captured from Rawalpindi. And then, of course, in 2011, you have that very infamous Neptune Spear operation where US Special Forces found Osama bin Laden a kilometer away from the Pakistan Military Academy in Abbottabad. You can't make this kind of thing up, Pranay. There's a fantastic Netflix series on right now which you can watch, and possibly which will tell you about what unfolded, how Pakistan has been running with the hares and hunting with the hounds. This is a double game that they have played throughout the Afghan war, or the first Afghan war, and what they've played through the global war on terror, and which is what they tried to do with India. But now this blackmail will not work, as Prime Minister Modi very clearly said. You cannot use terror as an instrument of state policy, and he has said this not now, Pranay. He's given Pakistan enough warnings after Pathankot and Uri, and then he has said talks and terror cannot go hand in hand, which was the Pakistani game plan all along. To bleed India and then yet keep talking about terror and Kashmir and all of those things. So now India is now very focused on getting the issue, the spotlight back onto terrorism emanating from Pakistan, which affects not just India, but the rest of the world. And as then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said very famously, Pranay, that quote of hers, that you cannot keep snakes in your backyard. She told Pakistan, in front of the foreign minister, Hina Rabbani Khan. You cannot keep snakes in your backyard and hope for those snakes only to bite your neighbors. Sooner or later, those snakes will turn on you. And this is what has happened to Pakistan n number of times since then. They have lost literally thousands of their citizens every year, but yet the Pakistan army believes that this is the war that is worth fighting. This is the option that we have to retain. We have to keep those terrorists going because we can use them to terrorize India, we can use them against Afghanistan, we can use it against Iran. Three of the four international neighbors that Pakistan has, Pranay, are literally sick of Pakistan's state sponsorship of terror, and they have conducted strikes on Pakistani terror training camps. That's three of us. That's Afghanistan, the Taliban rule Afghanistan, which is not recognized. The Iranian government, and of course India. And
you're absolutely right, Sandeep. And if you've seen last 1.5 years, we have seen Iran hitting at Pakistan and Pakistan-based terror outfits.
Yeah.
And we have seen Afghanistan getting into fight with Pakistan, and they both sides are throwing accusation against each other. But let us move on to another subject, because this Operation Sindoor is yet another. In fact, this is a new shining example of Atmanirbhar Bharat as well, because Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh also mentioned this aspect of it, because be it Sky Striker, the Akash Tir, which has actually successfully hit many targets in Pakistan, or maybe our defensive mechanism, the integrated UCAS system. It has actually proven you can say that it's a battle proven now. How do you see this development, and how do you see the progress as far as the indigenous weapon system and indigenous defense manufacturing is concerned?
Pranay, I believe that a golden era for India's indigenous weapon systems has just begun, and this is a validation of what this government has been doing under Prime Minister Modi for the last 11 years. I would see this as three phases. The phase one was the Make in India initiative, which began from 2014, when the government decided to make a lot of the defense hardware locally and to encourage defense industry. 2020, you saw a new Atmanirbhar Bharat focus, which was laser focused on literally jump-starting the indigenous defense industry, because the first phase was not as successful as the government would have wanted to. And now you have the proof of the pudding in the eating, which Operation Sindoor has just demonstrated to you. The fact that your networks, that your IACCS, the Integrated Command and Control System of the Indian Air Force, which is entirely Indian developed, you have a number of surface-to-air missiles which are indigenously developed. And most importantly, Pranay, the Sukhoi 30 MKI equipped with the BrahMos missile. No country in the world.
Absolutely.
And this is what has allowed the Indian Air Force to target airfields in Pakistan with pinpoint precision.
And as far as Sargodha.
Yes, all of the bases, all of the critical bases, and literally, Pranay, Pakistan set up this huge, dense AD network with Chinese radars and missiles, and of course, a few American radars as well. They just stood by and watched helplessly as these missiles just streaked to their targets, 11 of them, from the north to the south of Pakistan on the 10th of May. So it was unprecedented in the kind of show of force that the government did, and it betted on indigenous platforms for this. Now, the Sukhoi 30 and the BrahMos, as I was telling you, is a very indigenous innovation. I would not use any word like jugaad for this. This is not jugaad, Pranay. This is high-end, high-tech stuff which the scientists at DRDO have worked with the technicians and the pilots of the Indian Air Force to marry these two very capable platforms. A supersonic missile that moves at 3 times the speed of sound, which hits targets with CEP of less than 5 meters, married onto an aircraft like the Sukhoi 30, which is like a bomber. It's a massive aircraft. It's
Absolutely.
got enormous carrying capacity. And this opens the way for many more such innovations. Like we are hearing the BrahMos NG, for instance, which is a smaller version of the BrahMos, which will allow the Sukhois, for instance, to carry 5 or 6 BrahMos NGs. So effectively, the Sukhoi becomes a full-scale bomber with almost half a dozen of these supersonic cruise missiles. So there are lots.
So with this addition, we made this flanker more lethal.
I'm sorry?
So with this addition, we made this flanker more lethal.
It will definitely make it more lethal, Pranay, and the flanker, the Su-30 MKI, is going to be upgraded in India with a lot of Indian defense equipment, indigenously designed radars. Sukhoi has been in service for almost 2 decades, but it's not been upgraded the way other fighters have been. So the new upgrades are going to be essentially Indian in character and composition, and also will also be equipped with a lot of other long-range BBR missiles like the Astra, and of course the BrahMos NG, which I just spoke of. So it is a huge boost for indigenous defense industry, indigenous defense capabilities. And as I said, Pranay, this Operation Sindoor is a validation, it's a vindication of the kind of investments that the government has done in indigenous defense capability. And this will actually lead to many much such innovations and inventions, Pranay.
You're absolutely right, Sandeep. This is actually the validation of Indian equipments, Indian defense equipments and weaponaries. Before we move on, I think we should listen to what Defense Minister Rajnath Singh spoke about the new doctrine, the way it is, the offensive capabilities of India has become a new normal, and not only new normal, but it is the new defense doctrine of India, which Sandeep was referring to.
और साथियों, यह संदेश है कि अब भारत केवल विदेशों से इंपोर्ट किए गए हथियारों और प्लेटफॉर्म्स पर ही निर्भर नहीं है, बल्कि भारत में बने अस्त्र और शस्त्र भी हमारी सैन्य शक्ति का अब हिस्सा बन चुके हैं। अब भारत में बने और भारतीय हथियारों से बने हथियार भी अचूक और अभेद्य हैं। यह पूरे विश्व ने देख लिया है। ब्रह्मोस मिसाइल की ताकत को तो पाकिस्तान ने खुद स्वीकार कर लिया है। हमारे देश में एक कहावत काफी पुरानी है और वह है दिन में तारे दिखना। मगर भारत में बनी ब्रह्मोस मिसाइल ने पाकिस्तान को रात के अंधेरे में दिन का उजाला दिखा दिया है। रात के अंधेरे में दिन का उजाला दिखा दिया है।
So Sandeep, you heard Defense Minister Rajnath Singh categorically mentioning that now the offensive capabilities are included in the new defense doctrine. So action against terrorism, we are going to punish terrorism wherever terrorism is there, especially targeted against India. So how do you see this new defense doctrine, how sustainable it is? And many experts are calling it that this may disturb the geopolitical equations of South Asia. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the second part of your question first. What are the countries of the world saying that it's okay for India to take nuclear blackmail and to just allow terrorists to run rampage and have cross-border terrorism encouraged? I don't see any logic in this stance that you cannot defend yourself, and that is something that the UN Convention recognizes as well, the right to defense, and that is what India has invoked from the very beginning, Pranay. If you remember the statements that we made after 2016, the Uri surgical strikes, and of course 2019 Balakot and Operation Sindoor, we've always insisted that these operations were carried out in self-defense and in retaliation only. India has never struck first. And now the problem is that a lot of, Pakistan is now going out to the rest of the world and trying to paint India as the aggressor, and the fact that we used our military the way we did, and once again trying to bring Kashmir into the spotlight, trying to legitimize its sheltering of terrorism and terrorists, and painting itself as the victim, as it always does, to say that they have been the victims of terror as well, and they've lost 40,000 citizens. You and me have heard this line being parroted for decades now. A lot of this has to do with the terrorists that Pakistan has reared itself. The same snakes analogy comes to mind. The fact that you've reared the terrorists who are now coming back and biting you and killing your own people and your own citizens. So that is the kind of thing that Pakistan is going through right now. But the doctrine that Defense Minister Rajnath Singh spoke about, I would at some point like to see this doctrine down in writing. If there is an actual war doctrine of the kind, like say Cold Start was for some time, a Cold Start, for the benefit of your viewers, was the doctrine that the Indian Army came out with after Operation Parakram, when they discovered that the time that it took for them to mobilize onto the borders was longer than the time that the window of opportunity you had to punish Pakistan using the military. So the Indian Army came up with this proactive strategy of Cold Start, where when the order was given, it would mobilize its formations within 72 hours and immediately carry out shallow strikes.
But it did follow it was followed by the raising of integrated battle groups. So there was a formation as well, especially to suit the
and that remains that war strategy remains in place, Pranay. It's not spoken of very often, but the proactive strategy, it is masked in a lot of lingo, like the proactive war strategy and all that. But the fact is,
do you see it as an extension of the same cold start strategy?
The new strategy, the counter-terrorism strategy,
yes,
it would be a kind of, but Pranay, the cold start strategy was primarily land focused. It was focused on the ground forces. It was focused on the Indian Army and its offensive formations, and also the holding formations that were manning the border, the IB. But this new counter-terror strategy, Pranay, is very interesting because it's got all three services on the same page. And that's what we saw with the briefings on the 10th of May, where you had the Army, Navy and Air Force, the Tri-Services DGMO's briefing, very significant. The government was sending out a message saying that the counter-terror strategy was being formulated by these three services, and which is why they had the DGMOs of the three respective services. And they were talking about an escalatory ladder which they had formulated to punish Pakistan for sheltering and harboring terrorists and sending them across the border to India. So this new strategy, Pranay, is not just confined to the Army or even to the Air Force. It could well be the Navy's turn the next time. So it's a strategy that is meant to raise the cost of this so-called low-cost option of cross-border terrorism that Pakistan has pushed for several decades now. All India wants to do with this is to raise the cost for the Pakistan military. If the Pakistan military thought they could just run a couple of terror training camps and these low-cost, so-called non-state actors for a few crores a year, through Operation Sindoor, you have demonstrated that the cost of that strategy would be more than the kind of money that the IMF will be giving every year. So it will be in the millions, if not the billions of dollars. So we've raised the costs to the Pakistan military, and we've kind of told them that terrorism can never be a low-cost option from now on. From 10th of May is that watershed day from which the Pakistan military will no longer see terror as a low-cost option. The options are that either you see your military infrastructure, retain the kind of heavy damage that it did, or the government of India is not averse to even striking near your nuclear installations. And I'm saying near your nuclear installations, Pranay, because they did strike at the Chaklala and the Sargodha air bases without going into where exactly the missiles were dropped. But the fact is that...
But the Pakistanis definitely know that where they are hit.
They know where they are hit, and the evidence will emerge from there, from within Pakistan. And I think the bottom rungs of the nuclear escalation ladder have been shaken, Pranay. And I think the Pakistanis have seen that, they've understood it, and it must worry them enormously, because if they thought they could blackmail India with nuclear weapons-enabled terrorism, then Operation Sindoor has become a huge wake-up call for them. And I'm sure, knowing the Pakistan military, Pranay, and you've looked at him as closely as I have, that they are unlikely to change their basic strategy of trying to bleed India through 1,000 cuts.
But you made a very pertinent point, Sandeep, that they might be interested in, or they might try and continue the same policy, but now we have escalated the cost. Now Pakistan establishment, so-called Pakistan's military, have to understand that there is a cost involved. And earlier, in previous strike, you have written about it, about the Uri strike or the Balakot strike. But at that point of time, we have targeted the terror heads, the terror launch pads. But this time, we have not only targeted the terror headquarters, but we also targeted those who are perpetrating, those who are harboring, those who have been helping and keeping these terror outfits in their backyard. So the cost is similar for both terrorists and their masters.
Absolutely, Pranay. And that's what comes out very strongly in the Prime Minister's three pillars that he enunciated about this new counter-terror strategy, which is basically the fact that he does not see any distinction between terrorists and their sponsors, which means that this entire facade of deniability, plausible deniability, has been blown to smithereens. The fact that the Pakistanis could for the longest time say that these were so-called non-state actors over which the military had no control over. They are actually an extension of the Pakistan military and the Pakistan state, and that I think this government has been the first to recognize that and call them out publicly on several platforms, starting from the Prime Minister downwards. And this is a very, very significant approach, Pranay. I mean, we've known all of this for several years. The UPA knew this certainly during 26/11 when they discovered that there were several military officials of the Pakistan army who were involved in the planning. There was the Pakistan naval element that was involved in the planning. All of this, but they chose to still.
NIA charge sheet still mentions the name of Major Iqbal and Sajid Mir and
Yes.
many people
So,
from the Pakistan.
All of these interrogation reports by David Headley very clearly tell you that there are such umbilical links between the militant groups and the Pakistan military. The simple fact that David Headley told the NIA who interrogated him in New York in 2010 was that every member of the LET, every significant LET member or a leader of some sorts has an ISI handler. That's how closely they are. I mean, they are all handled by the Pakistan Army's ISI. So, you have Headley was handled by a major and Sajid Mir.
You rightly phrased it, Sandeep, that they are joined by an umbilical cord. But now India has changed its policy, and now Pakistan's military has to bear the cost. Thank you very much, Sandeep, for your time and helping our viewers to understand, breaking down every statement of Defence Minister, and especially India's new defence doctrine and its integration into India's policy against terrorism, which is the policy of zero tolerance. Thank you very much, Sandeep.
Thank you, Pranay.
Thank you.